Now, just to give you an idea of what picture quality looks like after calibration, I mean, you guys can see what it is. In my personal view, I feel like Sony has better blues. Samsung tends to target blues that kind of look a little bit closer to purple, if I'm being honest. And I wish that's something that could be fixed. That's Samsung's big problem. But again, we run back, we don't even have to run it back. Just look at, again, the grass in this example. I can't stress, like, for the longest time how I've heard grass on Samsungs are cartoony or they look like acid rain. Samsung has had color management for the longest time. And I mean the longest time. And you can do this on every Samsung. So everybody's saying that their Samsung or any Samsung is just oversaturated. They don't know A, that you can turn down the saturation to literally be a black and white picture. And B, you can do a color calibration and completely remove any acid rain effect or acid color effect that the Samsung would have. And I think, again, when you look at it side by side, this is on a Sony dedicated demo to make Sony TVs stand out and look the best. And if we run back our example here, and again, you can go and look this demo up. It's the Sony 4K demo, Feel the Beauty, okay, by the same person, Kwang Nugent. I hope I said that right. Probably didn't. Okay. And you can look at the grass. Just look at the grass. I mean, and this is what I'm talking about when I say people try to say that like Samsung's so inaccurate compared to a top of the line Sony. And Sony's just going to kick its ass in terms of processing because Sony is so amazing. And if you don't agree, then you're just a Sony hater. You're putting Sony down because you had a falling out with them or whatever. Pause right here and you look at it, you can clearly see it. You could see it with your own eyes. The Sony this year, by the way, is wildly flat, void of almost any real color. See, what you're looking at is a Sony that has been calibrated to my standards. I'm going to show you what this Sony looks like out of the box. Okay, so here we are in cinema mode on the Sony Bravia 9. And I'm going to go ahead and reset the picture, okay? There you go, reset. Cinema mode, you can see it right there. And you get the idea. Now the Samsung pulls ahead in a way that the Sony just can't even compete with. And this is Sony's cinema mode. And if you know anything about Sony's cinema mode, it is like the most calibrated mode, yada, yada, yada. You know how Sony gets down. But look at what it's doing for picture quality. It's not very impressive stuff. So much for Samsung's cartoony grass. When, again, Sony's calibration, my calibration standards. Sony's grass is like closer to the color blue than the color green. Because Sony this year, if I haven't told you already, has a problem. Everything on Sony has to be really blue. Look at the browns, look at the greens, look at the yellows. The landscapes will tell on a television every single day of the week because when landscapes are overly cool or blue, they almost look hazy. Because when you have brown that you are trying to make look blue, it will create haze. And that is happening all over the landscape where there is brown, you are seeing that haze. It doesn't look like that. I've never seen hazy rocks. This is not true to life. This is something that they've gotten positive feedback from the guys at the Value Electronics Diamond Retail Store, HDTV Test, Stop the FOMO, Whisper Status, now Brian's Tech Therapy, KG. Every single guy you watch, they have all said positive things about the Bravia 9, have they not? Not a single one of them sat you down and told you that there's a difference between color quality. And again, when your browns have a blue haze to them or blue hue to them, it creates haze. That's what you're seeing on the Sony. And therefore, that's the problem with the Sony TV to make it not look as good. They're not sitting you down and having these conversations because they're just trying to make money. Okay. I don't give a damn one way or another which TV wins. And I can tell you, if you pause on examples like this, the highlight placement on something like the Samsung is going to be way higher because it's intelligently putting the highlights where they belong. Sony used to do that and they're just not doing that. Instead, it's so flat. It's so flat, the profile, that it just looks terrible. So let's say, well, okay, let's go to a different profile to see if it's different. So let's try standard. Everybody's going to use standard. We're going to go ahead and hit reset. And immediately what you're going to notice is that it's significantly brighter. But what did we not change? We didn't change the color quality. It's actually worse. And by worse, I mean monstrously so. It's way too blue. The rocks don't even look like rocks. The brown is gone and the haze exists. Again, if you remember what I told you about color and color theory, when you hit brown with blue, brown turns hazy. And that's what we see here. We can run it back a couple frames. Go look at the grass again. Now look at Sony's grass. It looks like everything people tell you about Samsung. How unrealistic Samsung is. Have you ever seen a mountainside that has ever looked like that? That has just been overly blue on a sunny day? That's not realism. And I don't think Sony realizes that for all intents and purposes, their efforts are being wasted. Yeah, you got a bright TV, but it's pointless when it's so damn hazy and ugly. I mean, look at this scene right here. I mean, which one looks like real life? If I told you this was the Bravia 9 and this was the Samsung, I would have everyone in my comment section. Like if I crop this photo, right? I crop the photo and I put the two side by side and I'm like, look at how trash Samsung is. Look at how fucking like unrealistic their color is. Sony wins all day, every day. Sony processing for the win. Sony slaughters Samsung. Samsung is nothing. This is what Samsung gets for trying to take on Sony's best. You're not going to beat the experts. Every single Sony purist would run with it, I guarantee you. And you can do this. Literally go on to any one of those Sony forums where they haven't watched my videos and continue to pretend like I'm some crazy lunatic or some quack. Take these two photos side by side, crop out from this point where the girl is there, like literally from here, and put them side by side, merge them together, and just say that this is the Samsung. I promise you, they'll all believe it. Not a soul alive would ever know that this is what Sony actually looks like today, which is my problem. Sony's never looked this bad historically, ever, right? So now that we've established that going to a standard mode that's brighter, that's not going to do us any real favors, okay? So because that's not going to do us any real favors, we then have another thing that we have to do, go back to cinema. Well, if you look at cinema, the color quality improved a little bit. The core complaints still exist. It's hazy, it's flat, it's generally void of any real expression that makes you believe in TV. I mean, look at the flowers, look at the girl's skin, for crying out loud. People don't have haze on their faces. And this is something that I have always protested with calibration standards and with people who try to sell, TVs as the best when they look terrible. I mean, it speaks for itself. Look at the landscape differences, the sky differences. I mean, the differences in clarity and sharpness, it adds up after a while and it becomes overwhelming. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a time and a place, I guess, for this kind of thing. But if I'm being honest, as I look at the two pictures, if the sun's hitting me in my face, I'm not going to look like I'm in snow. And I'm not going to look like that at the beach, most certainly, where the water produces its own reflections, which you can see on the side of her face here, because that's a part of the artistry. Look at the bubble. There's a bubble literally close to her face, and you see that sharp, clear reflection. You still see some kind of a reflection here, but it's not as pronounced as it is on the Samsung. Because again, highlights aren't being put where they're supposed to be put. Color is not correct at all, and it just looks off. And you can see that. And virtually every example where there is an example, this looks like ungraded footage straight out of a camera. And that's the look they go for. And people eat this shit up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I don't understand why. And if we were to go, by the way, back to standard picture mode, which they perceive to be the standard for every general consumer, this is what that looks like out of a $3,000 television. They're just blasting you with brightness. Do you not see that? I know everybody here has to see that, because when you look clearly with your eyes, you see way more detail, way more color, way more contrast, everything on this picture, where this is just, they're just blasting you with blue and they're blasting you with freaking damn like highlights, but that's all you're paying for. And at that point, what is the point? Out of the box, the Sony is not impressive. And the relevancy of this is they claim to calibrate these expensive TVs already, so you don't have to do anything. And you're kind of getting an idea of how much color is lost, how much hazier it is, how much contrast in the trees here that you're just not getting. The water contrast is not there. It looks like a foggy day. And again, time after time after time, you will be met with the worst picture quality. And this is from Sony themselves. This is their demo to make their TV look the best with their calibration on their TV. You're getting what I'm getting at here. Their best isn't what it used to be. And I think, again, if you are a Sony fanatic, you would start sounding off the way I have been over the last several years about their declining quality, their declining picture, everything. It's just now an expensive, cheap product, because you can't tell me that the picture that you're seeing right here is a $3,000 picture. It's not. I have seen a flat, hazy image on virtually every TV that I've looked at, and it isn't impressing me anytime soon. And it never will. And people can try to pretend that just because there are reference standards in existence for SDR that have existed for over 30 years, that we need to stick to them as we have TVs with quantum dots upwards of 3,000 nits. It kind of gets to the point where it's a little stupid. Furthermore, if we kind of negate that and kind of just prove how pointless that is, because right now we're in cinema where accuracy is everything, right? Okay, but if we leave Sony cinema mode, which, by the way, I'll reset to show you, I haven't done anything to this TV. It just looks that bad, right? When you look at the color quality, just go ahead and pause right here. Just you tell me which TV you would prefer. I personally would prefer the TV to the left, because to the right, people don't look dead. But then, okay, let's say we're going to negate that, and we're going to go to standard mode, which, again, Sony says is the standard for everybody. Let's say you don't care about accuracy. This is what they think you want to see. What the hell is that? It's literally so damn bright and so washed out and literally void of any accurate color that you've ever seen in your life, all while bearing a Sony badge, that it's shameful to see. And then when you go forward and you continue, you can see more of the same throughout this entire comparison. It's just overly blue. So in a mode where accuracy doesn't matter, they're not trying to give you great color. They're just trying to give you more brightness. It's like they think the general public is so stupid that they can keep selling TVs where outside environments look blue and dead and washed, and we're just going to keep eating it up. I don't know how long they can get away with this. Pause right here. I don't know how long they can keep selling this to you. But apparently it's working, because, you know, there are people that swear by Sony, and that's great. I like my Sony products. I'm recording this with the Sony a7 IV. It's a full-frame camera that costs fucking $2,500. There's no hatred for Sony in saying that they are just not the same anymore. Look at that skin tone. And that's their standard that they think everybody should just watch as a standard for generally everybody. Because that's what standard mode is. It's basically the general population mode, or the GP mode, right? And for the general population, they think you want to have skin tone that looks like that. Go ahead and pause right here. But I mean, let's lens to living room, right? That's what Sony used to be about, lens to living room. And it goes from that to, like, you don't have the proper browns, you don't have the proper skin tone, you don't have the proper purples, you don't have the proper blues. So if all of your color is wildly off in your most standardized mode, what's the point? And again, there's no way to have this level of brightness and be accurate anyway. So if Sony wanted to throw accuracy out the window, then they should at the very least give you the color that you would expect, right? This is the part where I just lose, like, all patience entirely in the whole process, because it's like, it's a big farce. And then you go over here to the standard or to the cinema mode, and you get a lot of that stuff, right? You got better browns now, but again, there's a general haze that you cannot defeat. There's a lack of depth, and that would be the big thing I would say with this TV. There is a serious lack of depth. This TV looks so bad that to call it like rich and dark and inky and perfect out the gate is just wrong. Now I'm using particularly standard and cinema mode because these are like two of the most common modes. Professional's way too dim. I won't do that to Sony. Okay, I get it. Not everybody's gonna watch it in a dim ass mode like professional. But even if you use cinema, which would be like the next step up, it still doesn't look that great, man. And just looking at all the color differences and what you're not getting, the case should be clearly made that Sony needs to step it up. So whether you're for Sony or against Sony is kind of irrelevant. The truth remains that Sony has a lot that they need to fix. And the biggest one is getting outclassed by the Samsung S95D on their Bravia 9 on their own demos. I purposely did it this way so that you can't even say I'm using Samsung demos to make them look better. It is what it is. The Sony is just getting baked. And I think if you're honest about what you're seeing on the Bravia 9, you'd see it too. Hopefully this video finds you guys well and helps somebody out that maybe didn't know this information. And as always, until the next video, I'll see you guys later.